So should we wait for Ed or should we start?
I don't know. Do we know he's coming?
I don't know, but the last time he joined, I think it's 7.
That
Yeah.
was fine.
So maybe we do the official.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is, I don't remember what our title is. This is a subgroup of the Affordable Housing Working Group. And
No.
our subgroup is about housing development,
We're doing the housing planning.
housing planning. Sorry, shows how much I know. I'm Emily Cooper. I'm a citizen at large member.
No,
How
I'm
about
Rhonda,
you, Rhonda?
I'm Rhonda Spector. I'm a citizen at large member.
And I'm Helen Gregory. I'm on the board of the Council on Aging.
Great.
Perfect.
I think we did it. All right. I will give a, what do we think? Let's just talk for a second what we think the agenda is for our meeting today. I think we wanted to report back on our, the work we were assigned on the last meeting. Is that pretty much it? Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
And
So-
then, I mean, I don't know, and then maybe identify what further steps we need to take.
Okay. There he
Oh,
is.
here's Ed.
Hi, Ed.
Hello.
We all have introduced ourselves on the recording, so why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Oh, okay. I'm Ed Cosgrove and I am the representative from the Board of Health.
Okay, so I think the only goal, unless anybody has any other ideas, we were just going to report out on whatever we learned about our topics. Is that pretty much it? Okay, who would like to start?
I'm going to nominate you, Rhonda, I think.
Okay, I'll start. So my topic was teardowns, and it turns out that for the most part, there's two things you can do. One is have sort of restrictions on what you can build new, and the other is you can have restrictions on what you tear down, right? And I think years ago they already did some work on what you can build new. I think there was a zoning change in terms of what you can build new, and it hasn't had any impact as far as I can tell because we only have data back to 2014, but it appeared, and so that wasn't in place at that time. But I don't think, based on just what we see around town, is that it's had a huge impact on not tearing down smaller houses.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think what I remember, and I think the impact that it has had is what is built and the way it looks. So, right, like, so we don't have as many new houses with the garage forward.
Right.
And definitely the easement areas and the heights and things like that. So it wasn't about the tear down. It was about when you build it, making it seem like less of a McMansion, as they say. Right.
Right. So the other thing is, there are a couple around town, is that mostly they're focused on historic preservation. And so there's some demolition restrictions, and they primarily focus on ultimately historic preservation, not on saving small homes. So I can, so there's in Wellesley, there's one, in Newton, there's one, and if a house is 50 years old, it has to sort of go through a historic review, and that delays the time. So basically, even if it doesn't mean that the house doesn't eventually get knocked down, it adds costs associated with holding the house for a developer. And so in some ways, I think the idea has been that somewhat disincentivizes developers from buying houses that are going to have to sit and wait for a year and a half, and then you still don't know what's going to happen, whether or not they're going to be allowed to be knocked down. So I've not found anything where you just can't demolish a small house or something. That just doesn't seem to exist. So there's that, and then the only other question is, so that's one, we could have something like that, and the idea would also be that you're also preserving historic homes, which I suspect there's some limits on knocking down historic homes in the town, although I didn't specifically, we don't have any demolition delays, but I have to think there's a historic review. I didn't go into that. So the question is, do we want to be innovative? Is there any kind of an innovative idea? Clearly when looking at the 2014 data, houses are 1,000 square feet, 1,100 square feet that are getting knocked down, and houses that are getting built are 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. And primarily it's because the cost of the land is so high that you don't build a 2,500 square foot house, you build a bigger house, right? Because you have to buy the land and then you have to make money on the house. So the houses that are getting built are not moderate. They're unless somebody's building for themselves, they're pretty high end. So the question is, do we want to think creatively? And also, obviously lots of people who are in those homes don't want the buyout, the price that they get for those houses to go down because of any kind of a delay. Like they want to get the fair market value based on what a developer or anybody else. And the question I have, and I can't answer the question, is would a buyer pay the same amount as a developer? And they just don't have a shot. They don't get a chance to buy it because the developers are good. They come in and they see it and there's no broker and there's a way to go. So that's my only question. Is there a way that we can keep sellers whole and somehow give an advantage to buyers who would keep the house so that there would be an opportunity for them to buy it? And that's my only, so we could look at a demolition delay, but it would probably be based on historic houses. And a lot of the houses that are coming down are not necessarily anything that anyone would save for historic purposes. I'd love to say my old ranch was historic, but it did not.
Rhonda, does it have to be historic or it just has to be over 50? Like in Wellesley and Newton, is it just over 50 years old?
It's only 50 years old to get the delay, but that doesn't mean it doesn't ultimately come down, right?
So would it be helpful, since they're right next door, for us to have a meeting with the folks in Wellesley and Newton to just learn a little bit more about like how it is working out? Like, are people, what has been the impact? What was the, how are they keeping the property owners whole in some way? Like, what are they seeing the impact of it? How or why did they get it approved? Because we would have the same concerns, I'm sure, and they had to think those through, and I'd be interested to know what happened as a result.
Yeah, I think that's a good next step. That's a great next step, and I will do that. I can call them. But I think the only other thing I would say is, would there be interest in a revolving fund where if somebody's going to sell a house, the town has a $4 million revolving fund, and they could not only buy the house, but they could come up with a volunteer committee that renovated the house and then resold it, and the money went back in, and they kept doing it. I mean, I just think there's creative ways of making it easy for seniors who are the primary concern of being able to maximize the value of their house. If developers are coming in, there might be a way to be creative and come up, there might be, I would love to do that. That would be a committee I would get on, to renovate houses and then have brokers volunteer, to reduce their fees and sell them, because they'd go like hotcakes. So anyway, but that's just being out of the box, maybe that's just crazy. You'd save 5 houses a year, maybe less. But I think we have to think clearly that we want to make sure that people are not, do you really want to put a demolition moratorium, delay on a, 1,100 square foot ranch that hasn't had any renovations for the last 40 years because, somebody's moving out?
So there's a local firm, I want to call it like Pink Houses or something like that, that they, is that what it's called? That they tear down. Pink Ladies, and they renovate versus tearing down, right? Kind of thing, and try to keep the character of it.
Yeah, but they're usually looking at Victorian style era houses.
I was just wondering also if there were a way to waive certain fees for people who want to come in and renovate versus people who want to come in. So you'd get the same amount of dollars. It would just be the developer gets a break,
Right. Yeah.
not the, right, like, so the owner would still get $1 million for selling their property. It's just that the developer, A, would get some sort of break from the town on some sort of fee that they have to pay if they renovate it, even if it wasn't a partial tear down or something like that, versus tearing down and building a big thing. I don't know if that's another way to look
Yeah,
at
I mean,
it, trying to keep the
think
homeowner whole.
right. I think the problem is there's not a lot of the profit is in knocking down the old house and building a new, much bigger one. That's where you're looking at more of a nonprofit scenario where people go in and renovate and make it nice, and then people can move in. That's just there's just not a lot of money in it. So
Yeah.
so.
The other thing about renovation is, from my understanding, basically, if all you leave up is one wall or a corner, you can tear everything else down and call it a renovation. And then you can build this gigantic thing on the property that would replace the house under a renovation clause. And this happens on small lots where the lots aren't very wide. And because the setback was increased at town meeting a couple of years ago from 10 to 15 feet, it's no longer possible to just tear a house down on a small lot and replace it, because now the house would be too skinny. So this is how they get around it.
Wow.
And I've seen several of those. There's one on Galen Road right now.
That seems like something we should fix.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you can fix that, because again, you're stuck in the thing where the current owner, who may be, they're in their 70s, 80s,
Right.
they want to get the maximum value out of the property. They need it in order to pay for, assisted living or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like if both for that reason and also we'd have to get whatever it is passed by, the town meeting. I think we need to, whatever we come up with needs to not impact what the seller is going to get.
Right.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And so that's one I'd be interested to see in Wellesley or Newton.
Yeah.
How or if they did that. And
okay, let me see
but
if
Rhonda, I don't want to squelch your creativity. I mean,
Right.
if you have a vision and you want to put pen to paper on it, let's throw it
I
out there.
with it, but you need. I mean, it seems sad to me that we can't come up with a way to make it easier for seniors to get everything they need out of it and not have all the houses come down. But I think you need to throw money at it. You need to throw some volunteers at it, possibly. And I don't even know if it's illegal. Like, it might be. I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine the real estate people or the developers, would be very happy about it. They would feel like it was very competitive for them. So, maybe we could talk to some real estate agents and just find out if there's a way to, make it easier for people to sell to young couples or, people who want smaller houses without, I don't know. It seems like a problem that should have a solution that no one seems to have found. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we have some ideas, it's a great forum to propose them, but unfortunately, I don't have any. That's the problem.
Well, the only one I had was the idea of some sort of a revolving fund where the town could buy properties. But, does the town want to get into that business? I mean, that's, talk about not your business.
Right. And it's very sticky bureaucratically too.
Right. So, it's like, not like you could immediately go, oh, 800,000. Oh, it goes up another 50. Oh, wait. Right. So
maybe there's a way we don't try and, as they say, boil the ocean. Maybe we think about a pilot program that does something, right? Yeah. And we see what the impact is, and people can opt in or opt out, or, we could do something where the owner chooses to, like, maybe they're choosing to say, I don't want this to be a tear down or something. I don't know. So maybe there's something there where we give people the option and see and start small rather than just saying, we're going to do this for every tear down out there.
Right, right. Okay, so that's pretty much all I have for tear downs. I clearly have not solved the problem.
Well, I don't know how easily soluble it is. So,
Right. Well, who wants to go? Did you where are we with the housing authority stuff?
okay, well, I've had initial contact with Reg Foster, who's the director of the Housing Authority. I've seen and looked at their reports and their proposal projects that their plans for the future, which are very ambitious. It depends a lot on the availability of funds, both at the state, federal, and local level. They're very ambitious. I don't know how familiar you are with the NHA properties, but I could start with, let's say, the Captain Cook Seabeds Way property, which is up off of Central Ave. And the
Emily and I
plan,
are both in in Elliott District, so we know it.
okay. So the plans there are basically to pretty much leave what's there intact, but to upgrade as much as is feasible. They're now 30, 40 years old. So the kitchens and bathrooms and so on are getting outdated. Captain Cook portion of that project has serious, I don't want to say structural problems, but problems with the cladding of the property so that water leaks in or has a potential of leaking in winter when we have ice dams and things like that need fairly expensive work on them to fix it. And so there's obviously a search for money to do that. If you've been up there, there's a separation between the seabeds and the Captain Cook properties. They call it a berm. I think what it is it was leftover earth from the building of the two projects, and they just stuck it there. And they're talking about taking that out and building a multi-level, I can't remember how many units, but quite a few unit building there that would have parking underneath it. Because right now the parking is all surface parking for those projects. This would be underneath that building they would build as a way of expanding that. And that's, of course, there's the Captain Cook's is for moderate low-income families to have affordable housing, and Seabeds is for more affordable housing for seniors. So they'd sort of keep that, but then be able to increase the size of the number of units. So that's one piece of their project. The more ambitious projects are all off of Linden Street down by the High Rock School. Those buildings, the little low ones, the one-story pieces of that, the so-called Linden Street project was built in the late 50s. They are definitely at the end of their life cycle. There's all kinds of issues with the integrity of the structure. Water leaks in. People have complaints all the time about mold growth and so on. And so the idea there is to replace those. The Chambers Street buildings are the two-story kind of garden units. They look like a project building, brick buildings that are behind that. And the idea there is, again, to provide an alternative to that, maybe replace some or all of those. And then there's a piece of property behind that, which is sort of wedged in between the Linden Chambers project and then the what I refer to as veterans housing up on Yorick Road. Those little one-story bungalows where we already replaced some of them with duplexes couple of 10 years ago or so. And they're talking about building I think it's 150 unit building there, which would provide place for the people from the Linden Street project to move into, plus any displaced from anything they do with Chambers Street, and maybe add some extra units at the same time. And this is all totally dependent on external funding. And then they would tear down everything on Linden Street and then sell off the property to developers who would build moderate, the way I understand it, moderate income housing, low to moderate income housing. That would then be sold, I would guess.
Do they want it to be subsidized housing or just market moderate?
It would be moderate, market moderate, as I understand it. Now, I haven't talked to Reg Foster yet, so I'm just going from what I'm reading in their proposals.
Right.
And then up in the Veterans Project, tear down the rest of those bungalows up there and replace those with similar to what's already replaced some of them. So that whole thing is it's an extensive change to those properties.
How many additional units when they're done?
I can't tell.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to me there'd be a lot of additional units. There'd be, maybe 20% increase, something like that. But I don't know without, again, talking to Reg. And I'm going to set up a meeting with him first week in May, because he's presenting to the Board of Health tomorrow. And then I think he's coming to our big meeting to do a presentation. So we decided we would meet after that. Then I didn't find I haven't found anything. NHA doesn't consider Militia Heights theirs, so I don't know who quite owns that yet. But I will talk to Reg.
The comment that was made in my breakout group was that it was being purchased, or I don't know, owned or being purchased by the Charles River Center.
Well, that's that's what I thought for a long time, that they're looking at that as expansion property.
And somebody in our group then said that Charles River Group was going to lease it to the Needham Housing Authority, but I don't know
Okay,
if that's
so
true.
I didn't, but there was nothing in any of the material I got from NHA that talked about that. So my questions about that, I hope will get answered when I talk to Reg, or we talk to Reg. And then the Stephen Palmer property right now, again, is not Needham Housing Authority property. The property belongs to the town, but it was leased 30 or 40 years ago to a real estate company, who then renovated the building from a school to residential property, and given a long-term lease on it. That lease is about to expire in 4 or 5 years. And the way the deal was written is that the property is then to be returned to the town vacant. So I'm not sure how that's might work. I can't see that actually happening.
Right,
Because
kicking
they're
all the
gonna
people
go
that are
out to
renting
people
out.
Well, exactly. Where are they going to go?
Right. How many units are in the building?
That I don't know exactly. And again, I'm waiting to talk to Reg Foster about that.
Okay, and I guess the other question I'd have that you might ask him is, are they affordable or are they moderate? I mean, maybe that's good moderate housing.
My personal feeling is that they'll probably just tear the whole building down and start over with something new. Because the people that I've known over the years who've lived there, those apartments aren't really that livable. Some of them are like, the apartment goes up, it's a 2-story unit inside,
Hmm.
And if you're handicapped, it doesn't work
Hmm.
because you can't, there's no way to get to the second part of it, the upstairs part of it.
Every unit is 2 stories?
Not every unit, but I think some of them anyway. So it's
20
just not,
28 units.
is it 28 units?
Wait,
It's what the web, it's what the internet says, but
There might be
Okay.
20 moderate, units in this town. Helen, do you know
So
what's there?
that's where I am on what
That's
I've
great.
got so far.
and ironically, Helen, it used to be the senior center.
Oh, I do know,
Well,
I'm
the
sorry,
senior
yes, I
center
know,
was in the
You
basement.
knew that, okay.
Oh, yeah, we used that for a
I-
long time.
yes. I used to vote down there.
Oh, so it's the place across Pickering, like near where
Right,
Greenfield was?
across from St. Joseph's School,
Yeah, I know the
next
building.
to Greenfield.
Yeah. So it's 28 units. I mean, so do we know, like, do seniors who lives there? Is it mostly seniors?
It's a mix of age groups and income levels. It's very mixed.
Oh.
They're all low and moderate.
Oh, they are all low and moderate.
Yes,
Yeah, and I'm looking, there's like a website, it's interesting, that says, I just literally Googled Needham Senior Center. Needham's attempt to take back Stephen Palmer property has a long history. And this was from like 2010, and it talks about in 2005, we tried to do something. We involved Crown and Shield, and the Newton Senior Living was
that's the
involved.
company.
Yeah. So Crown and Shield operates the building
Right,
right now and has
and their lease is
to
up in a
lease the
couple of
property
years.
through 2028.
Mm.
It's about 5 years, yeah.
Well,
And then there was some conversation, this was 10 years ago, about taking the property back by eminent domain, but that was not something that happened.
Yeah, the issue there was, I think, as I remember, there was no place to put the people who live there.
Right.
And so they just decided to leave it alone for a while.
all right. Well, I guess we have to think about, maybe the larger group needs to think about what. You don't want to propose something that says that we're going to empty the building out.
No, but I think it'd be
That's
interesting.
not politically, that's not gonna work politically.
no.
If
I
nothing
think it would be
else.
helpful to know a little bit about the property, are there any use restrictions on it? Or anything regarding that land, and maybe if we could get somebody to go in there and look at the property and say, wow, we could make this larger, or the whole thing needs to be torn down, if somebody could do an assessment of it to know whether or not it was even feasible, whether it needs work, whether we could renovate it and get more than 28 units out of it. And for all, is it a historic property? Can we get historic tax credits for it?
Yeah,
I
I
wonder
don't see it as historic, but
if the building, whatever the building committee is, if they've looked at it and done any reports on it.
I haven't, I honestly don't know.
Okay.
But as I said, I'm waiting for my meeting with Reg Foster to see
Yeah.
what he can enlighten me with.
Okay, that's great.
When you have that meeting, I think it'd be really helpful. This was helpful rolling, saying all the things they're doing. As you said, it's very ambitious. If Reg has like an order or a priority in which these are gonna happen, a timeline or something, because they're not gonna do
Mhm.
everything all at once. That would just
No,
be
they
helpful.
can't, right?
Right.
It depends on money and when they get the money and that sort of thing. So money is gonna drive this to some extent.
Yeah, and I think the other piece that we want to put into the plan is just, the current plan has X number of units, and at the end of all of these, if and when there could be, an X plus Y for multifamily and X plus, Z for seniors, so that like there'll be, 20% increase in the number of units for
Right.
seniors, and because I can't imagine, if they take. I think I totally understand. They're like, it sounds like they're phasing over in Linden Street. They're going to build a building and move people who are living there into a new building. Then they'll have development sites. So there
Right.
should be, opportunity for expansion, which is what this committee's trying, what kind of expansion do we want? Should we be recommending that that's more, subsidized, affordable, or is that, somehow
Oh.
that land is available and you could put in market moderate, or workforce housing. I
Right.
mean, I
Or
don't
what
think,
they, what they build in there, and not a bunch of single family, units or,
Right.
or buildings, but, multifamily buildings that are low and moderate or something like that. But it's got to be something that's obviously the town's not going to have the money to redevelop that. So it's going to have to be something that is, I guess, attractive to a developer so they can
Yeah,
make
well,
some
if you
money
have a
on it.
big plot of land next to a school and the housing authority is able to sell it at a low price, just because they don't, they're mission driven, they don't need to make a profit off of this, they just need to break even. Then we can write a nice RFP that brings in some really good developers that'll make some housing that I think we enjoy, and that we could say some of it's for seniors or not for seniors, or however we wanted to
Right.
craft it.
And then the other thing is that might factor into that is the legislation that was passed relative to housing around public transportation, because that's not that far from either
Right.
Needham Center or Needham Junction Station. And it may well be within that one of those two catchment areas.
you're right. Actually, it's probably even closer to the junction.
It's probably closer to the junction, yeah.
Yeah. Great. Oh, that was an optimistic moment. Thank you. Much better than my presentation. Much more optimistic than my presentation. What do you
Well,
have?
let's hope. Again, it all depends on money.
Mine will be short.
What do you have, Helen?
And then, there's one other piece of property around that nobody seems to know what's going on with, and that's the old Carter factory in the Heights.
And
Well, it's owned by, it was bought by an assisted living organization, developer, and that's what they wanted to create there, and they still own it, right? So it's privately owned, and they got a special permit to make it assisted living, and now they balked at some of it was going to be assisted living and independent. And if it has independent housing in it, they have to do some affordability. And so they wanted to change their permit to not include the independent living. And I think people are giving them a hard time about that. So
Oh.
it's stalled right
so
now
it's
because
the Avery property
Yeah,
or
the Avery,
Carter, the Carters,
The one across from
across from Trader Joe's.
Yep. So that was Avery, so this is why,
Right.
it was built out as assisted living.
assisted
So-
living and nursing home.
Okay.
Right. And so
And
they
we gave
wanted to-
them, the
Yeah, go ahead,
planning
Dan.
board already agreed on a zoning change to let them put another story on that building.
Right.
So, I mean, we've accommodated these developers already, quite a
So
bit.
now it's kind of stalled, I think, because the planning board said, come back to us. We don't really want to get rid of the affordability and have you just not do any independent housing or independent
Right.
living there.
Right, I think, and we need that, let's face it, so.
But it is, just talking from my professional life, it is very hard to craft affordable assisted living. It's very easy to craft housing with services that looks like affordable assisted living, but if you go the route of we're going to be certified by the state and it's going to be assisted living, and even if you start having what's called special care or memory care, it is very hard to make the dollars and cents work. It's not unheard of, but most of the most of the assisted living in the state is market rate.
Mhm.
So I don't know exactly where it stands, and maybe we can ask for an update from the group. I just
Yeah.
know that it's stalled a little bit, which is unfortunate because we have this building sitting there, great location, talk about MBTA.
Exactly. I mean, this
So
Exactly.
many things to do with it.
And under this new state law again, that's that's prime property.
is absolutely.
So it's Helen. It's I've never been in there. It's assisted living. So are there small apartments with kitchen?
I did a tour with my aunt probably back in 2005, 2004. And yeah, so it was all individual little apartments.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then, like Ed said, then a separate building or a connected building that's was assisted living, but they were all the ones that we toured in that building that faces along Highland. That was all individual little apartments.
With kitchens and everything?
Yeah, like little kitchen. I mean, gosh, you're taking me back many years, but
Right.
they were, totally
Sounds like perfect affordable housing.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I mean,
proximity
it's
to the senior
unfortunate that-
center and everything. Wow.
It's
Oh, I
unfortunate that
know.
it's now privately owned by this developer who's just sitting on it. Like if it was something that we were able to, somehow use, it would be really helpful.
And I'm thinking the same is true with a much smaller property, but the property on Great Plain Ave next to the Congregational Church.
Oh, the old Christian Science
Yeah,
nursing.
so
Yeah.
that also, if I remember correctly from the planning board, they were thinking about doing housing. It wasn't gonna work, I think, because of the parking and because of all the zoning, all the things they had to do. So now I think they're not doing that. But maybe we can get an update. So this leads into, did not get far at all.
What were you doing? I forget what you were doing.
My job was to talk with the town and figure out like, where are the properties? What do we own? What don't we own? What's sitting there? What can we talk about? What are the barriers to using it? And that information does not seem to exist anywhere written down, which I have to say baffles me a little bit. All we have is green space inventories. We don't have, I can tell you where all the fields are, but I can't tell you that we own this sliver over here of this land, even if it's not developable. And I have to admit, when asked, I get, well, that's because there's no land. Well, that's because, it's not worth doing an inventory because nothing exists. I personally would still like to see, oh, there's this plot of land, it's owned by the feds because it used to be part of, the Militia Heights stuff or whatever.
Right.
Or there's this plot of land and it's marshland.
There should be an inventory.
There should be something. And it would be also helpful to have an inventory of, these kinds of properties, whether it be Stephen Palmer that's owned by the town, or whether it be the Avery assisted living, or the ones that are stuck, that are privately owned, that we don't have a concrete plan for, or are privately owned and sitting vacant. I don't think it's our job. This is kind of where I got stuck, because I don't think it's our job as a subgroup to come up with that inventory.
No.
I feel like this is something the planning department does, and would be a good recommendation, I think, for this group to say, we think there should be an inventory and it's kept up to date. And there is, what we could work on then is, if this existed, is to look at these properties and say, what are the barriers and can we get rid of some of those barriers? So for example, if it's federally owned or state owned, what is the process to getting it town owned? What does it cost money? Is it a policy and we just have to ask the right person? Is it owned by the MBTA and we need to talk to them? So rather than just saying, oh, it's not an option, which is sort of what
the other thing that came up years ago is that there were, the MBTA wants to sell, unfortunately, all of their parking lots. They want you to keep the number of parking spaces in all of the parking lots, but they want you to buy the problem was that I did a ground lease for the one over at Woodland Station, that one. Obviously the senior center was put into the MBTA, lot. Those are prime pieces of land. Over by Hersey, thank you. I was not going to get that. Over by Hersey. But the problem is that the parking underground, I know that you were talking about it at Cook, is extraordinarily expensive. So even if you pay nothing for the land to put in, you pay for to replace the parking, and that's at least equivalent to paying for the land. And then the T on top of it usually wants money for the land too. So but they do exist. It shouldn't be that way. The T should be giving it away, especially if they're requiring you to all allow development, and you don't want luxury development. You want, something that people can afford. So, but it's something else to keep in mind. especially if the MBTA is putting the legislation together. You should talk to them about their own lots.
And I think, so I didn't make a lot of headway. And it's frustrating because I think if we did have an inventory, we could have a really robust conversation. But we may have to start with, let's
Ask them to
create the image, let's have them, yeah, and I don't think this costs any money. I think this is part of somebody's job, right? This is not like going to town meeting and saying, so, and I can look around, I know people in other planning departments, I can see what their inventories look like, so we can get samples and see what we want it to look like.
Great.
Emily, I've been dying to share this with you. I think I need your address. We don't have to do this over we can do it via email, but
Yeah, not in the public meeting, but yeah.
literally.
I have seen that. I have
Okay,
seen
great,
that.
great, okay.
What is
But I don't know, I mean, isn't that, that's not very user friendly, right?
No, it's totally, so I thought maybe you would be able to look at it and get more out of it than I can, but it's.
I'm gonna have to try. I don't think I kept my copy. I'm gonna have to see if they gave it out. Gene
All right.
McKnight gave it out as something, so I might ask you for that, Helen.
I have it here with the map and, anyway, definitely reach out to me. I would be happy to drop it off or throw it in the mail.
Perfect, thank you.
What is it?
So it's called Needham Multifamily Housing and Affordable Housing Unit Zoning Overview. So it's there basically talks about different zoning districts. I mean, it's a big, huge spreadsheet is what it is.
Did that come from the planning board?
It came from, I
Yes.
must have come from, the planning board.
What is
It's got a zoning focus versus we don't know where the parcels are, right?
Exactly,
We
yes.
just know if we could cross-reference, if I knew this parcel was in this district, I could look at what the zoning is.
And there are a few different maps in here. So I think a person could kind of make their way through it, but it's quite involved. But it has like the Avery Square overlay, Avery Square business. Anyway, it's got lots of content, and I don't know exactly how it can help us.
Right.
I have content, but no capacity to use it. All right. And what do you have for us tonight?
My update, I'm sort of in the middle. I need to do more, and yet I listened to you carefully, and I'm not trying to go too deep. So you all are miles and miles and years ahead of me in terms of this education. So it was great. It is a great exercise for me, and I have much more to do just for my own self knowledge. But really, so my task was to review models for meeting the needs of those with disabilities and seniors. I really didn't delve into disabilities whatsoever yet. So that's still on the to-do list. And Emily sent me a wonderful list of different models of what other communities have. And so I started to try to put together a spreadsheet. And of course I have it on the other computer, not the one that I can share with you, but looked at, and also kind of kept coming back to comments from like the Council on Aging meetings, and just, one person has said her group, Generation Needham, those folks are looking for smaller group homes, less costly than Webster Green, or the sort of along the lines of Webster Green, with elevators. One piece of information that I heard is that, in terms of Charles River Landing, there's a really tight time frame there, or tight window to get in. And also the rent increases each year is what I'm hearing, but
what does that mean? What does it mean, a tight time frame to get in?
I need to follow that up to be sure I understand it correctly, but my understanding was a tight window, probably to, like, I'm guessing, and I need to clarify this. The way I heard it was almost like, we have this many apartments available, and you have to, apply by X date. And if you,
so they're well leased up, so they have a waiting list, is what you're trying
that
to
is
say.
my understanding, yes, but I can clarify that.
What about the Moderna, whatever that is? Oh my gosh, I went over there, and I was like, this is meant not for seniors. The hallways were so dark. It was like they're trying to literally chase seniors out.
Interesting.
You couldn't see anything.
Yeah, so I would be delighted. I mean, as you all know, like, this is a place where I could just spend days and days and days if I had the time to just delve. I mean, there are amazing models, and I don't really know where to focus my effort. You know, I started trying to look at how
Can
many
I
units,
give
how many-
I'll give a little bit of my work background. So no, it turns out almost nobody wants to ever go to a nursing home, right?
Right.
Nobody wants to. So what are nursing homes mostly doing now? They're doing mostly rehab or hospice, or people are real. And then of course it's a lot of memory care. I mean,
Mm.
memory care is all in some sort of fully licensed 24/7 type of facility. So now I've worked for two different places and I've studied almost everything. People want to live in comfortable places that are not that where the rents are not going up crazily, but they also want 24/7 somebody emergency help. They independent living. People really want to stay as independent as possible and have social
Right.
benefits in their communities, and have 24/7 emergency help. So if they call for help, they don't always have to call 911. They can call somebody and they'll come and help you. Half the time somebody fell and they just want somebody to come and help them get up. They don't want to call the fire department. That's embarrassing and humiliating. They want somebody to help them get up, or something happens and they hear something and they want just somebody to be able to call. And they also want things taken care of for them. At this, at the point you're getting older, it's hard to do chores by yourself. So I would say that, and people want community because everyone's lonely. Right. So, and I think Emily is working on the services part. There's programs that help people who can't afford all the services. I mean, that's the biggest problem we're going to have going forward, is that there's not enough 24/7 help. You can't get home aides to come in. You can't get people to come in and help you take a shower if that's all you need.
Yep.
One of the things that a lot of these places are doing is, for 15-minute or 20-minute or half-hour increments, you can have somebody come in and help you shower. They can help you get ready for the day. So I think that we're looking for independent, small apartments where people can figure out how to wrap services in for themselves, because everybody wants to stay as independent as possible. I mean, 88 and 90-year-olds who can stay in their own apartments don't want to go somewhere where they have 3 meals a day and a bed and a room, what feels like a hospital. So,
Right.
And I just want to flag that there's robust availability of services for people who are extremely low income. We can get we can get Medicaid to pay for it. We can get Medicare to pay for it. We can bring it to you wherever you are. But that tops out at about the equivalent of 30 or 40% of the area median income, which I'd have to look up what that is for Needham. And then you have people who are sort of in the middle.
It tops out at 30 to 40%.
I'd say about 40% of the area median income, which
is about $35,000 or $40,000
a person, an individual person. And then you're paying privately. You're paying on your own, and you're on Medicare, but you're going to have copays. And if that person is coming in and giving you a 15-minute shower, they're going to actually charge you an hour, because that's how long it takes for them to get there, unless you have a neighbor who can also, or they'll charge you for 4 hours.
Charge you for 4 hours.
Right, at $25 an hour or more. And then there's a group of people who are not wealthy,
right?
Because they're living in their asset, right? They're a homeowner living in their asset. They're on a fixed income, and they can't afford the private care on their own, but they're not poor enough for the subsidized care. And the reason I bring this up, and I think it'd be really great to connect some dots, like Helen, if you can somehow connect with the Needham Housing Authority, that looks like they're about to do, some renovations and some senior work. We want to make sure that if it's going to be for extremely low income people, that they're able to bring in the services, or if they're going to make it for higher income people, they're able to recognize those folks are going to have a harder time getting access to the services. So what can they do? So it would be really nice to think about. I know they're really focused on the buildings and building it, but at some point, depending on the population, it would be helpful for them to have a conversation with you to think about the services as part of their mindset. And then I can, help give you introductions to all sorts of service folks that can think about what's been going on.
Okay.
But I think that what we'd want, sort of pulling back, because
Mhm.
that's all the information. But pulling back, I think what we want to say is that we want to build independent housing where people will have the ability to afford living independently in
Right.
apartments, but
Yep.
that they'll have community and that they'll have access to services.
Right.
Yep.
It doesn't, not everything needs to be assisted living. People think about assisted
Right.
living, but if you go, there's a lot of housing that exists with services that you would think was assisted living, but really it's housing and they have access to services.
Yep. It does remind me of what Avery used to be, at least that one area one portion.
Right,
that I-
exactly, yeah.
We need to, I hate to say it, who's the owner of that Avery?
I'll do some Googling while we're here, but
All right, because maybe,
I'm sure it's some out of state,
call them and find out what they're planning. I mean, what a waste.
I know, it's
Like, and you're right. Ed, it's like, it's at the T, it's at Trader Joe's, there's a CVS there, it's literally
the
perfect.
senior center. I mean, it's just amazing.
Oh my God.
There's a Starbucks and a liquor store, what else you want?
What else do you need?
You probably already said the community council right down the street on Hillside
Perfect.
Ave.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's literally perfect. So, All right.
So Helen, just before we move on, I know you haven't looked at the disability stuff yet, and that's a whole other ball of wax. I wanted to flag that we didn't talk about it at the last meeting, but the CPAC group sent in a very thoughtful, they spent a lot of time on coming up with comments.
I did.
It seemed like it was a lot for people, parents of children with autism or developmental disabilities.
Right. I
seemed
did.
like.
I pulled that information because yes, but thank you for flagging that.
No, and I feel like we need to, make sure that we're responsive in some ways, and that, one of the things I would say is, I think I sent you specialized housing, but I also wanted to say, I just saw, there's a group called Forward. It's an acronym for something, Forward on Cape Cod.
Okay.
And they are, it's like friends or relatives with autism and related disabilities. And
Okay.
they have gone and built housing. They built a couple of 8-bedroom homes, and they got it all publicly financed, and it's a 8-bedroom, it's for 8 adults with autism and related disabilities. And they're building another one for people, same population, but people don't need on-site services. And I don't think this is a licensed setting.
So isn't this I'm asking a question. This seems like something where we want to change zoning.
I do think there's an area, I don't know enough about the zoning, but I do think it would be helpful if we could dig a little deeper on what happens when you have multiple unrelated adults living in one house.
Okay.
Does it automatically become a rooming house and therefore have zoning and habitability things?
That helps me understand.
So I don't know that. That's a really good question, Ron. In some communities, that's a big problem. I don't know if that's the case here in Needham, and maybe we need to investigate a little further.
So I think that we have to be careful, because I think that what we want to put something in, we want to have language that says that we want to support people who want to do this. And the question I have is, are we supporting them with CPA fund? I mean, are there funds or grants that we can help with? Or is it just, are we putting resources in, or are we just making it feasible for people to do it on their own? I think they were hoping for somehow the town helping with feasibility, making it, it not just allowing it, but that also helping make it happen. And I don't know which one we're aiming for. And that's just a question.
So I think there's also, depending on how the housing authority stuff works out. So for example, if they go after public funds at the state level, there's a whole bunch of funds that, if you take this money, it's called community-based housing, then those 2 units will be for people with disabilities coming out of a nursing home. if you take this money, it has to be for people who are served by the Department of Developmental Services for these 2 apartments out of the 100 apartments. So I think we can make a recommendation that when they're looking at public funding, that they are open to and involve those public funds that are specifically for people with disabilities, so that a handful of those units, not all of them,
For that.
could
Yeah.
be, we could increase the size, and those would be extremely low income folks.
Mhm.
I mean, we could also look at when they sell it, what the land that they're gonna sell off to a private developer, we could include some stipulations in there, like, and we'd like 5% of the apartments to be for targeted to people with disabilities or something like that. Like, I think we have a few places where we could increase the stock,
Yep,
but
that's,
that doesn't, what I was hearing, and I think what I was thinking about was that people wanted this sort of a different model too, which was sort of more of a group living model, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's what I got the idea that they wanted sort of more group living, not individual apartments where people were
Right.
alone. Yeah. So.
Right, but I think
that-
they'd be happy if
that's-
somebody could get individual apartment and their sons across town, right? Versus, I think they wanted people to be able to live in Needham. So I think if we can come up with ideas to increase the stock, that would help too.
Great. Agreed. All right.
So we have our next full meeting when? Anyone know?
yeah,
I have no idea.
May? Let's see.
and
And Rhonda, I know about Ed and Helen, but we have a town meeting.
On Monday, yeah.
Yeah,
And I have
See
a
the
Board of
Housing
Health
Authority?
meeting tomorrow night.
and the Housing Authority is asking for money in town meeting too, so that's gonna come up. I
I
don't
don't
see a meeting in May,
I
do you?
don't think we have one on the schedule yet. I think that's that doodle poll that,
Oh, okay.
so hopefully we'll
So-
get,
So should we set something up for us and then see what happens with the other meeting?
Sure.
All right. I think Tuesdays worked for people, right?
They do, yeah, so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's try and not do the first 2 weeks of May, because we will then be meeting Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for those of us on town meeting. Although hopefully it won't go too many sessions, so.
I
are we
don't think
safe?
it's gonna be long.
No,
Don't jinx it, don't jinx it. I never say,
we
if I
did
say that
that.
going in, it's always like we get stuck on something for hours.
The prep meeting was quick. All right.
17th or 24th?
17th works for me.
17.
yeah, that sounds good.
Sorry, I'm coughing.
All right, I hope you feel okay.
I feel fine.
All right, I will email Alex and ask her for the 17th at 6:50, which is the way she likes it. And it'll probably be about an hour or until 8 or something.
Great.
And
Yes.
yeah, it looks like we all have a little bit of work to do on different things.
Right. By then I will have met Reg Foster and I'll have some answers.
Great. No, this was good. Thank you. This feels perfect.
I feel like we're,
You know, I forgot to mention, but I'm gonna ask Alex if we can get this posted, and because I'm sure Ed has seen it, but the years ago, August 2016, the Council on Aging put out a big, like 129 pages of assessment of housing and transit options for Needham seniors. So I'll see
Yeah,
if we can.
Alex should have that already, I think.
I thought so too, and I was looking to see if it was in our resources. I didn't spot it, so I'll make sure that she's got it and see if
Okay,
we can get it in the resources for this group.
Great.
okay.
all right, great. Okay, so we'll talk to you soon. And I'll
Okay,
see
good.
some of you on Monday.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks. All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.